Hello, my name is Noel Kingsbury, and with my colleague Annie Guilfoyle, we put on Garden Masterclass. We thought we should put this little introduction to Garden Masterclass together for those of you who've not come across us before but have arrived at our YouTube channel. We aim to put on one-day educational events with the most creative and innovative people in the garden and landscape world up and down the British Isles, and that includes the Republic of Ireland. We've also started looking at putting on events on the European mainland, and this year we had one planned in France, one in Germany, and 3 in the Netherlands. Of course, our physical events this year are having to be rescheduled, but we're trying to do what we can online. Our events take place in garden environments where there's plenty to look at. And here we've got Nigel Dunnett, for example, in Trenton Gardens, discussing with a group the planting he has put together there. Or Sarah Price, the award-winning garden designer, talking about using drawing as a design tool at Treberwith Nursery in South Wales. Here, Marina Christopher, who runs a wonderful perennial nursery in the southeast of England at Parham House, talking about how she puts together perennials for effective planting design. And landscape architect and urban sketcher Liz Ackley talking about using drawing as a design tool for people in the landscape and garden design business. Since coronavirus has constrained what we do, we've gone online. Increasingly, we are hoping to run in-depth webinars. However, for the moment, what we're offering is every Monday and Friday at 4 o'clock London time, a broadcast, round about an hour, with information, education, and some entertainment. We talk with somebody from the garden world, we look at what they're doing, perhaps sometimes we'll have a panel. So far, we've had people from Britain, Ireland, Italy, and the United States. We've got plans to speak to people in Argentina, Ukraine, Lithuania, Japan, New Zealand. So we are pretty global. Our aim is to bring together gardeners all over the world to share experiences and see us through this difficult time. If you'd like to keep in touch, do please look at our website, or if you want to receive our occasional email newsletter, then do send us an email to gardenmasterclass@gmail.com and we'll put you on our mailing list, which of course will go no further than us. So we hope to meet you online, and hopefully one day we may even meet you in the flesh. Goodbye, stay safe and enjoy this particular recording.
Yeah, today we're back over the other side of the Atlantic again, and we're with Andrew Bunting, who I thought was a mythical figure because I heard so much about this Andrew Bunting from lots of people. I visited his garden many years ago before I met him, and I only met Andrew for the first time this March or February when I was in Philly for the flower show. So I realized that he was actually a real person. And so Andrew, it's lovely to have you. And Andrew is the Vice President of Public Horticulture. That's right, isn't it, Andrew? Is that your correct title? Right. At the PHS, which is the Pennsylvania Horticultural Society. And Andrew's going to talk a little bit about his background before we go into the main talk, which is about his own garden, because Andrew's done a lot of traveling and worked in various locations, and I think that is quite interesting, and it also puts into perspective a little bit about his style of gardening at home as well, and his influences, which are really interesting.
But also about the Pennsylvania Horticultural Society, which is a really unique organisation. It really is, very special.
And older than the RHS. Everybody who's in England thinks that the RHS is the be-all and end-all. The PHS was the first one. Anyway, Andrew, lovely to have you here. Tell us a little bit about your sort of background first before we go on to some PHS information.
Okay, sure. So it's great to be here. Thanks for having me. I'm speaking to you from Swarthmore, Pennsylvania, which is just south of Philadelphia, from my library. So we're all working from home, like I'm sure many of you are. So my background really has always been in in horticulture. You know, luckily from a young age, I knew that I wanted to do something around gardening. And early on, I did a number of internships at different botanic gardens, and that really got me interested in kind of the botanical garden world. So I did internships at like the Morton Arboretum, Chicago Botanic Garden, Fairchild Tropical Gardens in Miami, Scott Arboretum at Swarthmore College, which I eventually ended up at. So early on, I worked at the Scott Arboretum at Swarthmore College, which is actually just 5 blocks from here. And after a few years, I kind of got the itch, and I was early on in my career, and I really wanted to work in England. I had met at the Scott Arboretum, we had people like Penelope Hobhouse and Christopher Lloyd and Rosemary Veary and Nori and Sandra Pope all came to the Scott Arboretum to lecture. So I had some level of access to them. And so I actually had a conversation with Penelope Hobhouse, who at the time was at Tintinhull House, which is a National Trust property in Somerset, England. And she said, sure, you know, if you come over, I'll, you know, hire you. You can work at Tintinhull House. And so after 3 years of working at the Scott Arboretum in the late 80s, I headed to England in early spring of 1990. And I bought a used car. I worked at Tintinhull House. I think I visited 140 gardens in England I was there for most of 1990, so I really got to know, actually I met Fergus for the first time at Beth Chado's garden. I met Beth Chado, Rosemary Veary, Penelope Hobhouse, became good friends with Nori and Sandra Pope at Hadspin House, and also really good friends with Pamela Schwart and Sybil Kreitzberger, who were head gardeners at Sissinghurst at the time. So for me, it was, I would say that year in England really has influenced me so much in you know, the rest of my career and my design aesthetic and plantsmanship and all sorts of different ways. And then from there, I left England in the fall of 90 and ended up in New Zealand for their spring. So somehow I eliminated a winter somewhere in there. So I worked for Gordon Collier, who's a well-known gardener in New Zealand at Titoki Point, which is a garden that doesn't exist anymore. So it was kind of full immersion into New Zealand gardening for 3 months. And then I came back, jobless, penniless, and I actually got a part-time job at Chanticleer, and I know you've had a couple speakers from Chanticleer, and I worked there for about 1.5 years when they were transitioning from a private estate to a public garden. And then I got rehired back at the Scott Arboretum as curator in 1993 and stayed there for, you know, 20-something years till 2015, and at that time I got offered a job as assistant director of the garden at the Chicago Botanic Garden, which is a fantastic, huge public garden, kind of like Wisley in many respects. And so I was there for 3+ years, and then I got another job offer to become vice president of horticulture and plant collections at the Atlanta Botanical Garden in the southern part of the United States. And that seemed like a really good opportunity. One, it was, you know, Atlanta's a lot warmer than Chicago. And so it was an opportunity to grow like zone 8 plants, a lot of broadleaf evergreens I wasn't used to growing. So I went down there for about a year. And then this opportunity at the Pennsylvania Horticultural Society came open, and I was kind of looking to come back to this area, southeastern Pennsylvania, which really is no disrespect to anybody in the crowd who's from other parts of the United States, but I think it's you know, this part of the country, United States, is arguably the most dense area for gardening, you know, hands down, of anywhere in the United States. There's arguably better climates, Santa Barbara, Seattle, Portland, for growing wider range of plants, but there's this incredible concentration of private gardens, nurseries, and within 50-mile radius of Philadelphia, there's 37 public gardens, and we actually have a consortium called Greater Philadelphia Gardens that kind of helps promote that collective group. So that's my life in a nutshell.
That's fantastic. So now you're based in Swarthmore and you're at the PHS. So can you just talk a bit about your role there, but also, you know, what the PHS stands for and what they do?
Sure. Right. So PHS is the Pennsylvania Horticultural Society, and it started in 1827. So it's a very old society. And then in 1828, the Philadelphia Flower Show started and has run every year since 1828. So we kind of have several major arms to the Pennsylvania Horticultural Society. Most of what we do is very much community-based, grassroots, connecting people of all kind of abilities, from very beginning gardeners to very experienced gardeners with all sorts of different gardening and horticulture. So what most people know is the Philadelphia Flower Show, which is the biggest indoor flower show in the world, which gets, on average 250,000 visitors a year in March. So that's a big fundraising as well as educational arm for PHS. And then we have a lot of community-based programming. So I oversee public horticulture, which is all of our public landscapes. And just to give you kind of a sense of what that is we maintain all the gardens and landscapes at, say, the Philadelphia Museum of Art, the Rodin Museum, Lincoln Circle, which is a big kind of circular park in the center of Philadelphia, Eastern State Penitentiary, huge areas down at the Navy Yard, which is a big area that's being redeveloped. A lot of projects on the Delaware River waterfront. We also have a public garden north of Philadelphia in Montgomery County called Meadowbrook Farm, which is a former estate of J. Liddon Pennock, which is a 25-acre estate garden that we maintain. We also, in my department, have a little division called urban design that does design work for mainly park work for Philadelphia Parks and Recreation. And then we do these kind of ephemeral pop-up gardens that also have kind of like a beer garden aspect to them. So that's kind of public horticulture in its broadest sense, but we also do, we help organize and manage 120 community gardens. We have a large workforce development division called Roots to Reentry, where we train people who have come out of the prison system and train them up as gardeners and then help them place them. We have a huge tree program, which is street trees, called Tree Tenders. So somebody can train for 10 hours, become a tree tender, and then they become advocates for tree plantings in their communities. So I think there's over 8,000 active tree tenders in the greater Philadelphia area. And the greater Philadelphia area is Philadelphia, 5 counties surrounding Philadelphia in Pennsylvania, and then counties in western New Jersey, and then Delaware as well. So it's actually a fairly big geographic area, and we're actually thinking, ways to expand beyond that as well. And then a program that a lot of people don't know about is called Land Care. So we're contracted by the city of Philadelphia to go into areas of Philadelphia that have vacant lots. And just to put it in perspective, there's about 40,000 vacant lots in Philadelphia, and they hire us to go in and kind of clean off the rubble, grade the site, sow grass, plant, say, 2 to 5 shade trees, put a nice little fence around it, make it look kind of purposeful. And so we've been doing that for 20 years, and now not only do we kind of reclaim these vacant lots, but they then become essentially parks for a lot of these communities that really have little access to either public parks or even public gardens for that matter. So we also, the money from the city helps maintain those. So we maintain every 2 weeks, 12,000 vacant lots around Philadelphia. So it's actually become a model project for other cities in the United States and actually in other parts of the world who want to do this type of reclaiming of vacant and kind of blighted properties. And we've done studies of these properties, and it's shown that, you know, if you're in less than a mile access to a green space, that mental illness goes way down, housing prices go up, and then the one that's the most meaningful is crime. Violent crime goes down significantly. So, you know, we all know that green and garden spaces are great, but they are, you know, there's data to prove that they are really important in the cities. And then what we're really working on now, we have is food. So, you know, there's food deserts in Philadelphia. 11% of the people in Philadelphia don't have regular access to food, and it's predicted with COVID-19 that will double. So we're really trying to take, we have always taken a leadership role with regards to access to food, and we will be doing even more so during COVID-19.
So Andrew, this summer with the virus and everything that's happening, will the pop-up gardens happen, or is that going to be on hold? What's happening there?
Most likely they'll happen once we get kind of the green light from the Pennsylvania state government. So, you know, already some things are opening up, like in New Jersey, golf courses are open and garden centers in New Jersey, not so much in Pennsylvania. So gradually things will start to open. The pop-up gardens will probably, they'll open whenever restaurants are allowed to, maybe partially reopen. But the fact that they're outdoors may give us an advantage in that, people probably feel more comfortable having beer, wine in a garden space versus perhaps in an indoor space. So, it's, we're just kind of to be determined when all of that will open up.
Yeah. So,
well, I mean, fascinating. As a model of public horticulture, it's incredibly impressive, and I can't think of anywhere else where it's almost as if the city has kind of outsourced to this fantastic source of expertise, and very impressive that the range of work PHS does, and as you say, an incredible international model.
Yeah, thank you.
So, thinking about your own space now, Andrew,
yes.
You're going to share that with us, aren't you?
Yes. So, what Annie and Noel asked me to talk about is I have a project out front, which is my gravel garden. So I thought I would just walk you through kind of a little bit about how I decided to do a gravel garden. I will say that, over the years, I've seen lots of different gravel gardens. I think probably the very first one I saw was that summer of 1990 and going to Beth Chatto's garden. That was definitely influential. More recently, there's lots of people doing great gravel gardening work. I would say the real leaders in this country are, I think, in my opinion, doing the best work in the United States is Jeff Epping, who works at Old Brick Gardens in Madison, Wisconsin. And he also does a lot of private installations, fantastic designer and fantastic gardener as well. And of course, Lisa Roper at Chanticleer, she's been a great influence. And then locally, Adam Gloss and Jeff Jabko at the Scott Arboretum have been doing a lot of kind of gravel gardening technology. But also there's people, in the country that are growing great gravel garden plants. So I got a little care package from Brent Horvath, who runs Intrinsic Perennials in the Chicagoland area. And then I had bought some stuff from Sean Hogan at Sistis Nursery. So, you know, there's plenty of opportunities to get in great plants. And of course, Roy Diblick in the Chicagoland area as well is a great nurseryman for these types of plants. So why don't we get into I have a little PowerPoint here that we can everybody see that?
It's not up yet, but we're often a minute or two behind you.
Oh yeah, let me see here. I need to share screen. That's what I need to do.
You do, yeah.
There. Good?
Yep, that's looking good.
Okay, so this is, I'm not going to give you a complete overview of my home garden, but this is just one little snapshot. I actually do a whole program, Belvedere and Evolution of a Plantsman's Garden is the actual program. I changed out the words to do garden specifically. So this is what we're going to be looking at. That's not what it looks like today. This is what it looked like when I moved into the house 20 years ago. So just kind of an average suburban front yard. And kind of the American front yard is, I think, very different than kind of the English or maybe European front yard in that traditionally most front yards are mostly lawn. This one today has a little bit of lawn, then it had a lot of lawn. So this garden in 20 years has gone through 5 major redesigns. You can see on the right that tree is Acer palmatum. So half of the yard was shade for a while, but then that tree got verticillium wilt, had to be taken out. So it's changed a lot. So this was kind of year one. I wanted it to be kind of meadowy, cottagey. Actually, I wanted it to be kind of like an English, in my mind's eye, an English cottage garden. So I bought all these plants, you know, kind of perennials of the time, things like Geranium Johnson's Blue, Alchemilla mollis, Euchera villosa, Centaurea macrocephala, Petrinia scabiosifolia, and wanted to do kind of big drifts and masses, and then have kind of a irregular flagstone walkway going up to the front door. What I didn't realize is, so I sprayed off the front yard with herbicide and then tilled it all up. And what I did is I exposed 50 years of dormant seed. It was all viable. So the weeds were unbelievable. It took me all summer just to weed that little front garden. So this is probably fall of 1999 is when I bought the house. And then this is spring of 2000. And you might say, you know, why, beautiful garden like that, why did you change it? Well, things forced me to change, like the kind of big fluffy violet blue, that's Geranium Johnson's Blue, that just kind of died out. Things like the Petrinia scabiosifolia seeded all over the garden. As I mentioned, the shade tree on the right died, and so the shady area became more sunny. I had Gora, you can see a little white there, Gora lindheimeri, which actually I may add to the gravel garden. That just died out in our area. I think the soils are too heavy, so it's not really a long-lived perennial. It's actually more like an annual in our area. So, you know, things changed and kind of forced my hand a little bit. This is a little later on when the tree is gone on the right. I had a friend who used to walk by, and she's like, you know, Andrew, your yard is great, but it's too much. It's too rambunctious. You need some lawn to kind of set off the perennial areas. So I actually added lawn, and kind of that vacant space was a nice juxtaposition to kind of overflowing borders. And really by the end of the season, the yard became, really, it was almost out of control. Like on the left, those are all Amsonia hubrichtii, which really become shrub-like in the United States. They can, you know, one, say, court in 4 years can be 5 by 5 feet tall. I had Millennia Sky Racer, which got really big. I had a whole bunch of different Vernonias that got really big. So everything was so big it would hang over the path. The mailman would come on, a morning or late morning when there was a lot of dew, and he would get sopping wet by the time he left my garden because of all the plants hanging over the path. I always had around the border of the house kind of unusual shrubs and small trees, and that's still kind of the case today. And the vines, the same. A lot of people in the United States will say, oh, if you have a brick and mortar house or stone and mortar house, you shouldn't grow self-clinging vines because they feel like the roots, can compromise the mortar of the house, which is probably true, but I think in my case it actually holds the house together. So on the right side of the door is Decumaria barbara, which is a native, a southeastern United States native vine related to climbing hydrangea. On the left is silver vein creeper, which is Parthenocissus henriana. The alliums are all purple sensation. You'll see some furniture. Almost all the furniture in my yard or in my garden is made by Dan Benarsic, who's one of the horticulturists at Chanticleer. And then this metalwork is done by a local metalsmith named Matthew Harris, who's based in Maryland. So that's on the left, that's Amsonia hubrichtii in the fall, great fall color, great textural plants. So I actually have gravel represented in other places of my garden, and I've used it as kind of a less expensive paving, versus say brick or Pennsylvania bluestone or something like that. And the gravel I use is they call it 1/2-inch granite gravel. It's actually more like each little piece is sharp and like more of a 1/4 of an inch. These chairs I bought also from Dan Benarsic. Dan Benarsic made these metal 2 tours. This building was my garage, and I had it maybe about 10 years ago turned into kind of an indoor-outdoor space, a summer house. So people in this area, like on weekends, they either go to the New Jersey shore or they go to the Poconos, which is a little mountain range up in northern Pennsylvania. And I just kid that, for my summer house, I just go in the backyard. So it's less traffic and more access to gardening. So this little gravel garden, which is still there today, is more kind of, I say, California Mediterranean in my plantings. And then at the open end, kind of down to the left, is that's more my tropical South Beach, Miami planting down there. I do love tropical plants. That big plant on the left is a South American native, Solanum quitoense. And then Dan Benarsic's chairs as well. I do love agaves. I have a nice collection of those. And then another place I've used quite a bit of gravel is actually in my vegetable garden, which I live on Vassar Avenue. Every street in Swarthmore is named after a college or university. So mine's named after Vassar College in New York. So this is Vassar Farm, which is actually just a large vegetable garden. But it's entirely in my neighbor's backyard. So about 8 years ago, I went to them in the middle of the winter when I knew they would be vulnerable, and proposed putting this garden in their backyard with the idea that I would design it, build it, maintain it, pay for everything, and that the only thing they would have to do is we would co-harvest together. So it's kind of four quadrangles, compost to the left, chickens to the upper left. So that was the plan. That circular bit is actually their garden in their backyard around a little patio area. And then for me, it was like my property is all the way to the left. You can see a little opening in the hedge. That's how you access my property. And for me, it was meant to be kind of a secret garden, because the hedge, which is now really impressive, it's all Thuya green giant that's sheared. and it's 8 feet tall. So on my side, you kind of come to a red gate, and you kind of wonder, why is there a red gate on the edge of my property? But on the red gate, there's 3 medallions, one at like 6 feet, say 5 feet, and 4 feet. And the idea is you can push the little red medallion to the side and get like a little peephole view into the secret garden. So at the time, one of the things I did not mention in my kind of career journey is when I was actually at Chanticleer, I started kind of just doing some gardening on the side, and I did it with a friend of mine, a partner of mine, Tony Koya, and we then started a business together called Fine Garden Creations. So over the entire course of when I worked at the Scott Arboretum, I had this business, and when I left for Chicago, it was relatively small, but I sold it. We had 15 full-time employees, so I had access to a landscaping crew, and most home gardeners don't have easy access to that. So I thought, this would be a way to figure out how much does it cost to build a vegetable garden, which, by the way, it costs a lot. I know there's a book like forgot the name of it, but something like $37 tomato. Well, in my case, it was like the $125 tomato, because it took a lot of labor to build this garden. So their backyard was kind of compromised. It was a bunch of invasive exotic trees that had to be removed. A lot of, even though it looked flat, required a lot of leveling. And then you can see the quadrangles here, and you can actually see the red gate in the distance. So vegetables, strawberries down the center. These 4 trees that are around this central square, which is where I had Dan Bonarsik make a custom-made table out of ginkgo as the surface. Those are Asian persimmon, Diospyros khaki, one called a seiju. And those are actually nice size now. And when I left for Chicago, they were producing 200 persimmons per year. Now they produce, the 4 of them last year produced 2,000 persimmons. So more than anybody can eat, but I tell you, everybody loved them. So obviously you can see I used the gravel there, same kind of granite gravel. So back to current project. So this is just a little video of my front yard. So I actually did both sides, but this is showing I removed the soil where I was going to do the gravel garden. So the idea is you actually remove say 3 to 5 inches of soil. This is a side that when I took the video had been completed. So I wanted to keep the lawn area. You'll see this little stone wall out front. My front yard actually slopes enough where I needed to put in, I didn't want like a formal retaining wall, but I also didn't want anything that looked too contrived. So I did this kind of stone arrangement to kind of hold the gravel on the uphill side. It's not really a hill, but it does slope enough where if I didn't put that in, the first big rain, all that gravel would wash into the street. So here's, I'll show you the preparation, and then I'll tell you a little bit more about it, and I'll turn down the volume as well. So this is like a heavy-duty tiller. In the United States, the company is Gravely. So you can see the soil's been removed to say 4 inches, and then some gravel is brought in, maybe 2 inches. You can see the gravel here, and 2 inches of gravel is brought in, and then we actually till the gravel at 2 inches into the existing soil, which in Pennsylvania is kind of a heavy clay. So we need to add some porosity to the soil. And then, so here you can see it, the soil's removed. I did keep some plants. I kept a few Amsonia, which is one on the left. Hydrangea paniculata, Lindera glauca salicifolia. There's an Aronia to the down towards the street. That tree is a catalpa. There's the Gravely tiller. So you need kind of a heavy duty tiller to really get that gravel into the existing soil. In this case, the plant I left is a Millennia Sky Racer. And then there's a Physocarpus Diablo. And then those evergreens or Juniperus virginiana, Emerald Sentinel, a selection of Eastern Red Cedar. I did use a landscaping company, Bill Conwell's company. He's a local landscaper I've known for years. I just didn't have a way to get rid of all that soil. And the soil was totally filled with two awful weeds in this area, Lesser Celandine, Ranunculus ficaria, and Star of Bethlehem, it's an Ornithogalum umbulatum. Both really pernicious. They are kind of spring ephemeral, so they do go away, but they're really a mess. So it was kind of a win-win in getting rid of all those weeds, I hope, and adding the gravel garden. So as I mentioned, I did use cistus, and you'll see on here, there's quite a few agaves. Agaves are not really hardy here, although any of the Perrii species, which you see about 5 or 6 down, they might be hardy. So that'll be fun to try. The aloe, that'll be tender. So I do have some tender plants out there, like the agaves that I'll bring in and out. But there's things I want to try, like if you go down towards the bottom, you know, like the brachyglottis probably won't be hardy. But there's a Bupleurum. So Bupleurum is, you know, I know a plant you see often in England, but for us it's either, I think it's the drainage that probably kills it. So I think by increasing the drainage for a lot of these things will help, you know, with their survivability. So everything on here is not from the gravel garden. You'll see aspidistras and things like that, but like Arctostaphylos, those are Western species that really don't grow here, but again, maybe with better drainage, worth a try. So for me, part of the fun of the gravel garden is trying a bunch of plants that I don't typically grow. So you can see this is actually on my basement floor. Those are a bunch of different hardy cactus, and those should all be fine here. Again, it's not the cold, because they can take zone 3 in the United States, but it's often the drainage that would kill them. And then a lot of the agaves will be more for seasonal interest, and I'll dig those up in the fall. Here's a list of some of the things I've planted to date. Offline, I was talking to Annie and Noel. At first I thought I wouldn't have enough plants. Now I think I have too many. So this is stuff that I've already gotten in from some nursery in the United States, Cistus, Issima, which is Ed Bowen's nursery. I have a big order coming from Tony Avent from Plant Delights Nursery, which will augment all of this, and that includes some Nymphophias and Baptisias and some other Vernonias. So I think at the end of the day, I'll probably have more than enough. So this is it, kind of, this is the first half that was done. So I actually intended just to do the first half, but then the other half looked so poor that I just decided to bite the bullet and do the whole yard in its entirety, which I would have ultimately done, but perhaps over 2 seasons. So you can see some big agaves, which will not be hardy. There's also some lavenders in there, both hardy and tender types. The tender ones I'll use more as probably annuals, but the hardy ones, like you know, any of the intermediate types. There's one in there, Phenomenal, which is Lloyd Traven's introduction from Peachtree Farms, not far from here. Adding some structural elements, you'll see a big jardiniere there, and then kind of a lower square. That's actually a bird bath. I just added kind of a little metal structure. So for me, it's the most exciting part is kind of playing with a new palette of plants and plants that I know but haven't necessarily grown before. And then also the design aspect. So, you know, this is not a type of of garden design I've done before. I've seen a lot and been obviously inspired by others. And so, you know, if I look at, say, Chanticleer's gravel garden, it's fairly planted. But then when I look at Jeff Epping's work at Old Brook, there's actually quite a bit of space between the plants. And so I think at least initially I'll lean towards the space between the plants, but since I love plants so much and want to grow so many things, I envision the voids becoming less and less over time. So I also like it because, you know, I feel like in certain types of gardening and horticulture, you know, I feel fairly up to speed with, you know, from a knowledge-based point of view. But with this, I feel like kind of a novice gardener. And it's, you know, I remember back to when I was like in high school and I was growing like, you know, real ordinary things like red salvia and blue salvia and zinnias and things under the lights in my mother's basement, you know, how like that real, you know, kind of visceral feeling of like new and exciting. And like, I must say that like, I feel the same way about this gravel garden in a way that I haven't really felt about gardening before. I mean, I love gardening, but there's something about it that's just so like, you know, exciting because it's all new. And it's also a little, I must say a little daunting and, I won't say scary because it's not bad, but you know, I don't know how these plants are going to do. You know, I've never really gardened this way. And the idea with the kind of 2 inches below tilled in and 3 to 4 inches on top is that most of the smaller perennials actually, you know, the idea is you take off, make them almost bare root, plant them actually into the gravel. And the idea is that they grow through the gravel, through 4 inches of gravel, down into the soil base below, anchor into the soil base, and that you have kind of 4 inches of kind of hostile gravel above where it's hard for any weed seeds to come into. So that's part of the idea is that, you know, if you create this layered effect and the desirable plants can make it into the soil level below, the weeds in the top part can't survive. So that's the hope. So here's some early planting. The agaves actually had to dig down through the gravel and quite a bit into the soil. You can see kind of some roots of agave in the distance there. There's a verbascum thapsus in the foreground. So this is when the right side got finished. You can see the kind of irregular stone wall, if you want to even call it that, out front, but just kind of for purposes of retaining the gravel above. There's a Dazzylirion, which is that other finer kind of spiky plant. And then in front of the wall, I just want to do kind of a simple mix of, that's mainly what I've planted there is Nepeta, one of the shorter Fascinii types, Vernonia, iron butterflies, Serrata stigma, Plumbaginoides. So the idea that out there is just kind of a simple tapestry of tough perennials. And also, as I was mentioned to Annie and Noah before, is the front yard is not deer fenced, and deer are a real issue in this part of Pennsylvania. So already I've seen 5 deer out front there. So I'll be able to tell you what's drought tolerant and deer resistance, and probably the deer resistance part I'll be able to tell you sooner than later. So they're digging into the existing clay, which the agaves, you know, while they like, you know, kind of a gravelly soil, will actually grow in the heavyweight wet clays that we have in this area. There's a bird's eye view I took the other night, kind of looking down. You can see those stone balls. I just brought those, or actually, I had them in another part of the garden. I brought those out the other day. That chair is also made by Dan Benarsik. And then you can see actually in here, there's behind the chair, kind of across the lawn, and then across the path. Those are 3 existing Amsonia hubrichtii that I kept. And then to the left of that one Amsonia, that grass, is the Millennia Sky Racer. I kept, I think, 3 of those as well. And then in the fall, I'll also add some bulbs back in. I'm sure I'll add species tulips. I know I'll add in alliums. I think they would look great here. Nectaroscortum siculum, which is kind of used to be called an allium. I'll add that as well. So I think different species bulbs will definitely be added. Here's that little metal architectural piece that I added the other night. You can see actually the little divots, I think, are all from deer walking through the garden. So I'll have to do some gravel raking as well, I suspect. There's that agave is Agave americana, which is a great kind of glaucous blue agave. And you can see, so the 2 Amsonias flanking the path. You know, the existing plant, I kept some of the shrubs just to give some sense of maturity to the garden. So the one that's kind of cut back behind the chair, that's Hydrangea paniculata limelight, which I think is one of the best of the panicle hydrangeas. And then behind that is one of my favorite shrubs, which is Lindera glauca variety salicifolia, which has narrow leaves that turn incredible, kind of pumpkin orange in the fall. And then this time, actually a little earlier than now, have yellow flowers, kind of like our native Lindera benzoin. This one is Asian. And all the Linderas have alkaloids in the leaves and stems, so the deer stay clear of them. So that's the end of the visual presentation.
That was great, Andrew.
That's fantastic.
I wonder whether, I mean, I think people who who don't live in the States don't realize what a problem in suburbia the deer are. I mean, in the UK, it's a problem in the country, but it's a real problem for you, isn't it?
Yeah. It's so around here, like my backyard is completely fenced one way or another. If it's not fenced, it's I mean, they'll eat almost everything. It's easier to say what they won't eat. I used to think they wouldn't eat daffodils, but even this year out front, all my daffodils were munched off halfway down. So they won't.
They don't eat grasses, do they?
They don't eat grasses. They don't eat ferns. Those are kind of general groups.
Okay, right. Nice green garden.
Yeah.
You know, I'll find out the other things they don't like. I know they don't like Amsonia hubrichtii, things with like fragrant foliage, fragrant stems, milky sap. So Amsonia is in the Apocynaceae, the dogbane family, so they don't like that. They don't like the lavenders so far. The rosemary is obviously fragrant, things like that. Fuzzy things they don't seem to like verbascum and, you know, like Stachys byzantina. But, you know, they're also can be incredibly voracious. So, you know, I thought daffodils were sacred, but obviously not. Pachysandra, boxwoods. You know, we've
got a couple of little messages actually. Susan Ryan in the well, Jenny Harris to start with said that in the Pacific Northwest they do eat Lindera. Maybe they're more hungry over there. And then also Susan Ryan says that in Tacoma the deer walk down the sidewalks. It is a problem. It is a real problem.
Yeah. They'll come right up to the window. They're not daunted by.
They need a few. You need some natural predators, some wolves.
Yeah, we don't have those. They do get hit by cars, unfortunately. But
I have visions of you sat in one of Dan's chairs with a shotgun and a beer. I think.
Yeah, a beer is pretty accurate.
Well,
the lady, Grace Hensley, can you remind us, please, when you started the gravel project?
So last fall, I started moving out things that I wanted to keep. So I have some neighbors who are kind of beginning gardeners, and they're happy to take anything that I'm willing to give them. So a bunch of things went over into one of the neighbors' yards. So I mainly did moving and editing. Actually, I hired Chris Fehlhaber from Chanticleer, he came and helped me. So it was mainly editing and moving in the fall. And then this spring, I hired, as I mentioned, Bill Conwell Landscape Company to do the soil removal, and then bring in the gravel and do kind of the gravel prep. And then I'll do the planting and everything from here on forward.
And the question about how your neighbours, what do the neighbours think?
Oh, yeah. So I kind of wondered that. And now that I'm home all the time and I can go out there and I actually look out the window and people stop and look for sure. And I've queried quite a few people, and I thought they would think it was kind of the aesthetic would be too different than what they're used to.
Or un-American.
The person that has come by says they love it. So they just love it.
The outskirts of Philadelphia, I mean, this is a fairly forward-looking region, and also a region with a great garden culture.
Yeah, true. And Swarthmore is kind of American. If there is a hub of horticulture in this greater area, Swarthmore is one of them. There's a lot of keen gardeners in Swarthmore. Joe Henderson, David Mattern, Charles Kress, and Judy Penny. There's a lot of people that are fairly keen. So I'd say there is probably a heightened sense of gardening in this area.
But as a wider issue, I mean, traditionally American front yards, or indeed entire gardens, were grass, and there's the infamous lawn ordinances that I know there have been numerous times over the past few decades, to be honest, struggles in various parts of the United States. I mean, very generally has, I'm just thinking of other places, the sort of small towns in the Midwest, for example, where perhaps not so much a gardening culture. Are these lawn ordinances being dropped? Would you still face opposition for doing anything in your front yard that was?
No. I would say even though the American lawn seems fairly sacred to many, I would say you're free to do whatever you want in your front yard. And in Swarthmore, there's actually quite a few front lawns that actually have vegetable gardens. It was taken out, but there was a little vineyard in somebody else's front yard. So, especially in Swarthmore, if you walk around, it varies greatly what people have in their front yard. I would say most people still have a bit of lawn, and I actually still have a bit of lawn. But it's you've
only got to go to Portland, haven't you? I mean, if you go to Portland, front gardens are just off the scale.
Yes,
they're incredible.
Yeah, I think kind of that paradigm is shifting, where people realize that a lawn requires so many fossil fuels, and if you want it to be perfect, you have to put down 2,4-D, which is a known carcinogen, and other bad chemicals. So people are getting wiser and wiser to whether it be water-wise gardening or using just appropriate plants and having less kind of chemical and fossil fuel inputs into their properties. I had a couple weeks ago, a little boy came down the street on his little scooter. And he was with his grandmother, and he said, "Oh, I was here earlier today, but you weren't here, and I've been looking at your garden." And he said to me, he couldn't quite articulate what he was trying to say, but he actually said, "Oh, water efficient," which I thought, I didn't even know the word efficient. But it turned out that both his parents his grandparents are college professors, so he obviously is probably smarter than most 6-year-olds. But I thought it was interesting that he could look at on his own, look at the gravel and kind of make that connection that these are, and I'm sure in his mind he was thinking desert, and people.
There's a question here, Andrew. Somebody's asking, when you were over in the UK, did you visit Denman's, John Brooks's garden?
Yes, so I did. That was also, I would say, I'm glad you brought that up. Definitely influential early on. I mean, I didn't really think about doing a garden, a gravel garden until, almost exactly 30 years later, because I was there in the spring of 90. So yeah, he was, what's interesting is, John Brooks designed the whole English wall garden at the Chicago Botanic Garden, which is fairly impressive. It's kind of like a conglomeration of, like, you can see bits of like Sissinghurst in there and Great Dixter and other kind of iconic English gardens. And a lot of people think, oh, John Brooks is traditional English gardener, but he's really, if people don't know his work, I would say he's really more kind of was really more of a modernist.
Oh, very definitely, yeah.
Was really doing kind of the work that Pete Oldolf is doing now, but even probably actually around the same time that Pete Oldolf was starting to do that type of work.
Yeah. The person who's probably going to be most pleased is your mailman, because it's going to cut 30 seconds off his route, isn't it?
It's going to do that, but I noticed I had a substitute mailman yesterday that actually cut through the gravel garden.
Oh,
so
well, I bet they will. That'll desire
I have to bolster the edges with my cactus collection.
They'll be impaled on an agave if they're not careful. We have a question about the size of plants you're using, plugs or quartz.
Yeah, so I'm using limited, obviously, that the garden centers aren't open, so I've been really relying purely on mail order nurseries. It's ideal, and I was actually looking through the notes that Adam Gloss, who's a horticulturist at the Scott Arboretum, was suggesting. He suggests actually plugs, but that's if you're doing, here, if I was to buy a flat of plugs, the minimal amount would be 50 per flat. I don't need 50 of anything. I don't even need 6 of anything. So I've been going to mail orders, buying them, and then I bare root as much as possible, get the soil off the roots and kind of bare root them. So that's been kind of my approach. I would say, if you ever come to Scott Arboretum, even in downtown Swarthmore, we actually have a traffic circle in Swarthmore. I know there's, traffic circles in every intersection in England, but they're kind
roundabout.
They're not. Oh, roundabout. Thank you.
One of the great British inventions.
Yes, I love.
In the days when we did inventions.
So there's a gigantic roundabout in Swarthmore that has this incredible gravel garden in the center. And if you're doing a big landscape like that, in there they only have maybe less than a dozen different species. So for a big application like that, you would want to get plugs in a nursery. And then you're actually removing less soil. And there's an economy with planting plugs as well. So, there's a lot, there are some incredible plug nurseries around here. North Creek Nurseries is one. And then New Moon in New Jersey. Those are both great plug purveyors of all the kind of stuff that I want to grow as well. I see my buddy Jared Barnes wants to know about self-seeders. So Jared, who's somewhere in the crowd, he's now a professor at Stephen F. Austin University in Nacogdoches, Texas, but he was my summer intern. So I claim any great thing that he does, I'm going to take credit for. So he has asked about self-sowers, and I do want self-sowers if they will self-seed into this kind of 4 inches, which I assume certain things will. I know at Chanticleer, as an example, one of my favorite plants is the wild quinine, Parthenium integrifolium. That self-sows there, as does, what do they call it? Wine cups.
Alroy? No.
Involucrata. So I hope that certain things do self-sow, and like any garden, I'll edit out whatever ones, if there's either too much or they're not in the right place, I'll do some editing of the self-sowers.
Self-sowing is the most unpredictable thing, though. I mean, it really is so. And there are certain things that often do self-sow, but there's a kind of big middle ground of things that will self-sow madly in one person's garden, but not
Sure.
halfway down the road.
Yeah, like I wouldn't mind. I planted some verbascums. I would like some of those to self-sow. Somebody actually asked about Salmisia, which is a New Zealand native. The problem with a lot of these things that I would like to grow, like Brachyglottis, Salmisia, again, maybe it's not so much the cold, but we also, on top of everything, have incredibly hot, humid. I think it's, whoops. What happened here?
Incredibly hot, humid.
Oh,
yeah.
sorry. I clicked something and you guys all disappeared. So
We're still here.
anyways, oh, there you are. I thought I actually hit the wrong button that like turns the whole thing off. So anyways, yeah, the humidity, I think, is ultimately the biggest issue. So I love, there's lots of New Zealand plants and actually a lot of West Coast plants that I would like to grow, and I will try them. I have out there, and I have some more things coming from Tony, even some South African things. So I think that, again, if the cold is not so much the issue, if I can, obviously drainage is going to be really good. So I think some of those are worth trying. Denver is an extremely cold part of the country, but they can grow a lot of, higher elevation South American, Argentinian plants, as well as South African plants, which you would not think would be hardy in Denver. But I think it's not so much the cold, it's the drainage. And then Denver has almost, I wouldn't say zero humidity, but very little humidity. And we can have days where you walk out the front door and do a little weeding and you're just sopping wet because it's so, so humid. It's hard to explain to an English person who's never been to the United States how humid it is. It's as everybody says, it's unbearable. Somebody typed in Verbena bonariensis, which is a plant I love. For some people, that's one of those plants where it can get out of control. I've even seen it kind of listed on some invasive exotic plant lists in the United States. Probably not so much around here because it's probably not perfectly hardy. But yeah, I love Verbena bonariensis. I could see definitely having that in this garden. Limited amounts. One of the self-sowers, just as a little aside, which was the biggest gardening mistake I've ever made in my life, was planting an umbel called Cryptitania japonica purpurea, which maybe in England is like a really nice self-sower. Well, in the United States, at least in Swarthmore, it is like it creates like a carpet, and it's a carrot relative.
You can eat it.
It has a really long taproot. So it's impossible to get rid of. And I thought that I had eradicated it. So I planted it 20 years ago. It was one of the first plants I planted. And, I'd spray it when I would see it. And I actually have discovered it again, hiding under a thuya hedge. So I thought it was all gone.
Ready to jump out.
It's even worse than goutweed, Agipodium, which is, as many of you know, at least in the United States, not a real desirable plant.
So Andrew, this has been fantastic. I think what it also has been is an amazing lesson of even people with lots of experience like yourself are pushing themselves into areas and using plants that they're less familiar with, but also being brave enough not to do it in the back garden, but on show, public front garden. I mean, that's great. And I think that shows the sort of honesty and braveness of horticulturalists. It's, let's experiment and let's play around. So I think that's been a lesson you know, as well as watching you develop that beautiful front garden. Also, before we say goodbye, I think you'd quite like to know this, that one of the people listening today is an old friend of yours, the very gorgeous Sarah Wayne. So she's
yes, I see her. Hi, Sarah.
I saw her name.
So for those of you, if you've never been, Sarah Wayne and her husband Jim Buckland for decades were the head gardeners at Westing College, which I still regard as one of the top 5 gardens in the world.
Oh, fantastic!
Sure, it hasn't changed much since they left, but really incredible in so many ways. If you can ever go to any other garden in your life, but you can go to one, go to Westing. I mean, really. And they took it from. I mean, it was as they would say in England, it was a tip, right?
It's funny you should mention Westing because maybe, just maybe, we might be swinging by there tomorrow. Possibly. So if anyone,
I also see in the crowd one of my colleagues who's a fantastic gardener, Jenny Rose Carey.
Yeah.
Many of you have probably been to her garden. She's also English.
Yeah.
And I see another person who I don't really know, but I definitely want to go to his garden, which is James Golden. So.
Yeah,
oh, yes, James, that's fascinating. It's not too far away from you. No excuse.
I know. New Jersey.
I know it's New Jersey, but don't hold it against him.
I can't believe you've admitted to not going to Federal Twist.
I know. No, I feel like we're cyber friends, but I don't think we've ever met in person.
Oh. Well, it's been fantastic, Andrew. Thank you so much. And it was also very nice to meet you in person this year, because I did think you were a sort of myth, because everyone I knew knew you, and yet I thought, does he really exist? Yes, he does. It's great. Thank you ever so much.
Yeah, thank you, Noel and Annie and Sarah.
Yeah, thanks
soon.
Yeah, and see you soon.
See you all tomorrow.
Bye.
Good luck with that garden. Good luck with it.
Yeah, thank you.
Bye.
Bye.